Thank you, Kara. What a profound story and really powerfully told. Hi, everyone. I'm Rohan Narayanan, the Associate Director for Communications and Public Relations here at NORD. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next plenary session, Rare Onset and Diagnosis in Adulthood. Some patients with rare conditions do not receive an accurate diagnosis until they are adults. And some rare conditions do not manifest until adulthood. Our panelists today will share their unique experiences and how their diagnosis impacted their lives. Joining us for this panel, we have Daphne Jones, a patient living with POEMS syndrome, Pam Mace, registered nurse, patient, and executive director of the Fibromuscular Dysplasia Society of America, and Robert Myrick, Kentucky Volunteer State Ambassador for the NORD Rare Action Network, as well as a patient. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and insights on this important topic.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're up here changing our order a little bit. So I'd like to thank NORD for having me here today and letting me share my story. I know that the majority of rare disease patients are children, but there are a lot of adults that are diagnosed, like the three of us sitting up here. I was 37 years old when I was diagnosed with a rare disease called fibromuscular dysplasia, or FMD, and that does not stand for the Fashion Model Directory or foot-mouth disease. So I like to, it's fighting my disease is usually what the acronym is that I choose. But anyways, there were a lot of challenges, and I'll start with those when I was diagnosed. I was 37 years old, very active. I worked in a local emergency room here in Cleveland. And I grew up with 5 brothers, so I was very active. I ran every day, ran marathons, scuba dived, skydived, and I was really living life to the fullest. And I really thought after nursing school, when I had graduated, that I could pursue any dream in my life, and that was what I was doing at the time. And so I woke up one morning and I went running, and I had a dull headache, and but I ran like I did every day. And when I came back from my run, my pupils were unequal, and my headache was a little bit worse. My head was tender to touch, and I thought to myself, okay, what would I think if someone came into the emergency room with unequal pupils? And I thought, okay, I'm 37, there's no way it's an aneurysm, can't be a stroke, I must have a brain tumor. And being a nurse, I was scared at the thought of any of those 3 things, but I was hesitant to go to the ER because I just felt funny. I was healthy, in great shape, and I thought there's just no way. And so my headache kept getting worse, and about 5 hours later, I finally did go to the emergency room. And my blood pressure was 210 over 130, and as I was standing at triage, the left side of my face had went numb. And so they immediately took me in the back, and several hours later, I was sent home with a diagnosis of unequal pupils. And at this point, I had become very hyper. It was hard for me to even sit upright. So I went to an emergency room where I had worked, and the ER doctor was there, and they diagnosed that I had tore one of the arteries that supply blood flow to my brain. So it was considered a trauma, and I was transferred back to the first hospital, who was going to send me home again. And it was really my nursing that helped save my life, and I think put me on the road to recovery with my disease. But I ended up in a 48-hour period tearing 2 more of the arteries that supply blood flow to my brain. So I tore both of my carotid arteries and my left vertebral artery. And a lot of patients don't survive one tear. And so at that point, my life drastically changed. I felt like I was no longer a nurse. I was a patient who was scared to death. I could no longer work. I lost my financial stability. All of my relationships in my life changed, including family and friends. And I think I heard this last night talking to people. Well, you look good. I mean, look at them. They look great. And you would never know that they had a rare disease. And so I know that this has been spoken about this morning from other people too. And I think that you're going to hear the same themes here that, a lot of us have experienced. And so through my diagnosis and trying to navigate the healthcare system for myself, at least I was a little bit familiar with it. And so I initially didn't have a diagnosis for a year. And a doctor said to me, why don't you go to the National Organization for Rare Disorders website? They should be able to help you. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get home, turned on my computer, and I started crying because my disease wasn't there. And so that little bit of hope I had at that moment was gone. And so over the years, you hear everyone say that you've got to be your own advocate, and that's what I started doing. And it was out of fear and desperation. My mental health deteriorated, and I used to tell people, I'm stuck in the mud. Someone would say, let's go to the movies, let's go shopping. And I just wasn't capable of moving because I was so afraid of dying. And at the time, I had no diagnosis. The doctors couldn't tell me what was wrong with me. I was dismissed. I walked into a doctor's office, and I said to the doctor's receptionist, can you please have the doctor look at these? I found these articles. Could I have any of these rare diseases? And he said he could tell by looking at me that I did not. And one of the diseases was fibromuscular dysplasia, which I ended up getting diagnosed with. So I left the articles, and she said, well, hold on, he wanted you to have these. And she handed me a box about this big, full of articles. Some of them were in there 5-6 times, and said he'd like you to read these, pretty much telling me he was the physician, and I didn't know what I was talking about. So that was the first doctor I fired. And then, along the way, you talk about firing doctors. I had a doctor that said to me that she wouldn't clear me to go back into the emergency room and work. And I'm thinking, what else am I capable of doing? I can't type. So this was really before, computers were really a thing. It was 22 years ago. And so I found another doctor who wasn't as afraid of my disease. And so by doing those things and advocating for myself, it gave me a little bit of my life back and who I was. I was no longer allowed to run. I was no longer allowed to do the activities that I was used to doing. And I can remember at one point, and I think it's hard for family and friends, you truly are the people that get us through this. You're our support system, but sometimes I think it's hard for them to understand. And it was very difficult for me, but then when I tried to wrap my head around it, they look at you and you do look good. And I don't think that they know what to do or how to help you. So I think that, back to what someone else said earlier, communication is so important, and sharing with your family and friends, how they can help you. And at the time, I was single, and so my family stepped in. I had to move in with my parents for a while. I slept on their couch so that they could help me. I slept 20 hours a day. And my parents, my fiance, helped me with my bills, because at that point, I carried private insurance. And I'm like, how am I going to afford my insurance? Now I can't work. And so all of these things added to the diagnosis. So your team, your people that you build, that was the first step in helping me to be able to get out of the mud. And I can tell you I haven't been in the mud for years. I'm actually doing great 22 years later. But advocating for yourself. And so after I got my diagnosis, I actually went to the Cleveland Clinic. My doctor had stopped all of my meds, and he told me that he didn't agree with it. He told me that I had to get over this, go on with my life, and I just felt like I was going to die. And so finally, I found a doctor at the Cleveland Clinic who immediately made my diagnosis, and that was the first time a year later that I felt like I could relax and I could be the patient. Because prior to that, I really felt like I was going to die and that I wasn't going to make it. And so that started the healing process for me. And by becoming my own advocate, I did things by contacting NORD, getting the disease listed, looking at all the resources that NORD had, and they have a wealth of information on their website. If you're diagnosed with an ultra-rare disease, they have resources, they have contacts all over the world that can help you. They've got financial resources that can help you. And so I can't say enough about that. And then what I started doing was trying to do my own homework on the disease, and there wasn't a lot about the disease known then. And I can tell you 22 years later, my story's a little bit different than theirs, but it was really my nursing that opened a lot of doors. And we now have 17 registry centers in the United States that are doing research on this disease, and 2 of them happen to be in Cleveland, Ohio, 5 minutes apart. And so it's the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital. And with my disease, through the advocacy work, years ago I went scared to death, a scared patient. I flew to Belgium and I met with a couple geneticists. And I just said, I'm in way over my head. I don't understand all of this. And they were very kind, and they guided me to physicians they thought that could help me within the United States. And through that, I was able to move forward. And all of a sudden, the fear, the anxiety, the depression, I was able to go back to work. It just all started fading away. And I found my new normal. And so I'm no longer a clinical nurse, but I am the executive director for my organization. It was never a career path, speaking or traveling. I was never thought I would be what I would be doing when I became a nurse. But we now have a patient registry. And I bring this up because I want to offer you all hope. For those of you that are newly diagnosed, you know, just one person can make a huge difference. And we have over 4,000 patients in our database. There is no known cause or cure for my disease. I have 2 metal stents in my head. My kidneys are affected, and it can affect any artery in your body. The 90% of our patients are women. And so through the research that we've done, just last October, the geneticists identified 4 genes, we don't have a primary gene yet, that are linked to my disease, and now they're estimating over 5 million women have it. So when you look back at when I was first diagnosed so long ago, when I had no hope, I was scared to death, and I thought I was going to die, you know, I'm here to tell you that there is hope and that you can make a difference. Your family, everyone that gets involved can make a difference. And I have to reiterate, you know, being your own advocate, being persistent. You know your body better than anyone. If you have to fire your doctors, find a new one. And your people are so important. And I think that if you don't feel that you have that in your own group, reach out to NORD, reach out to groups specific to your disease. Those patients can be a wealth of knowledge for you. And it's nice just to be able to call somebody. It's nice for me to be here, to know that everybody in this room understands what I'm going through and what I've went through. And I can go home and my family just looks at me like, Daphne has a lot of family here today. I don't have a family member here. And so, you know, 22 years later, I think my family's over it. But it's so nice that you guys are here and you're supporting her. It's very important for her journey. And I think that I've seen a lot of families that are torn apart by this. I've seen financially families that are ruined, divorce. And so I think from the onset, you know, I know it's hard to not be stuck in the mud like I was, but, you know, just try to get up every morning and just do the little things that you can do for yourself. And I, you know, for a while, it was really hard for me not to be able to run anymore. And I thought, my husband said, you know, Pam, eventually as we get older, life's going to slow down anyways, and you're going to have to look for alternatives. And he was right. So I started walking. But that really changed my mindset. I felt a sense of loss and not being able to run anymore. And then I no longer had that. And so I think you've got to look at those opportunities and the things that you can do now, you know, whether it's reading, gardening, you know, find your new normal. And it really does make a difference in your mental health, and I think getting involved. And each door, I can tell you now, when I first started, there were no doctors, and now I have phone numbers of doctors all over the world, so I don't fear anymore. I can go anywhere, and I'll just call them. So the more you get involved, the more resources and the more help that you have. And so I would just like to thank you. I know we're going to open up the discussion more about how we got to where we are, but I'd like to welcome Daphne up here. And so thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for the introduction, Pam. That was wonderful. And thank you for the NORDS Foundation for having us here. This is a wonderful platform, and I thank you so much. You all have been so kind. and so wonderful to me and my family. We have felt welcome from the time I spoke to Tiffany, Amanda, and all of you on the phone. God bless you. And Jamie, I don't want to forget Jamie, but thank you. And second of all, I would like to thank my family. They have been my rock. From the first day of diagnosis, they have been my rock. I think about my daughter and my son-in-law. When I first got the diagnosis was metastatic cancer, but she packed her family up from Florida, she and my son-in-law, and in 8 days, they were by my side. My twin sister and my granddaughter, I couldn't have done it without you, so thank you. And next of all, I would like to thank also the Cleveland Clinic and my wonderful doctor and nurse, the doctor who diagnosed me and who has been treating me since 2019, and my nurse. I couldn't ask for a more wonderful staff. So I'm going to begin on how this journey began for me. I went into work one day. I'm a teacher, so I went into work. I was feeling a little off that morning, but I went ahead into work anyway. I didn't want to take off. But as I got in the door to work, walking became very difficult. My legs felt very heavy, and it felt like I was walking in sand with weights on my legs, and my back felt like it was in a vice. So I called the principal and said, I think I need to go to the emergency room. So my twin sister, bless her heart, and my granddaughter took me to the emergency room, and they took me right in, started running tests, and then he said, we're going to do an MRI. 2 hours later, he came back and said metastatic cancer. I was devastated. Nothing prepares you for that, and that was the last thing I expected to hear. So he said, we're going to start you on chemo. And so doctors kept coming in, but every time a doctor would come in, the look on their faces, I'm scared, I'm alarmed, because they kept coming in. They never really changed the diagnosis from cancer, but they were becoming more and more unsure of what the diagnosis was. So they started doing blood work, setting up the IVs and having everything ready for me. And I'm still petrified. So then all the tests began. And I'm still scared because it's test after test after test, blood work, and they're still not sure. I got some other diagnoses that I may have MS, a fungus, or something else, but it wasn't. So, and I'll wrap this up because I did go in other places. So after 7 days, I ended up leaving and with a list of tests that I need to run, PET scans, bone biopsies, and things like the EMGs. So I had all of those done, a lung, and then I also had a partially collapsed lung that I don't know what happened there. I never felt that, and an enlarged spleen and liver. So after 7 days there, I went to those tests. But about a month later in July, my left side went numb. So I went to another hospital. They took it that I had a stroke. 6 days in, after every test you can imagine, from spinal taps and everything, they still didn't have a diagnosis. So my daughter told them, just let her leave. All the tests, I'm becoming more and more distraught because, if you don't know if you're dying or living, they don't really know. My doctor said, we're going to send you to the Cleveland Clinic. So I came to the Cleveland Clinic, and they decided to start everything over. By the time I came there, though, I had declined. I was in a wheelchair. I lost the use of my hands. They curled under. I couldn't care for myself anymore. So after 11 days and test, I can go on. I'm sure all of us have the same test that was required for a rare disorder. But after 2 bone marrows, biopsies, just so many tests, I didn't have a diagnosis, but on the last day of leaving, they said, we're going to give you a call. We think there's a doctor who knows what you have. So 3 days later, I got a call from the Onset Cancer Center. And you can imagine my world shattered because then I know it's some type of cancer. So I came in September 30th, I'll never forget. The doctor and my nurse and a lady from the pharmacy came in. And he said, you don't have cancer. My world I cried. I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I didn't have cancer and the kindness. But he said, but you do have something that's treated like cancer, okay? He said, you have something that's extremely rare. So I'm scared again, and I'm okay. He said, we're going to treat it like cancer. We're going to start you immediately on treatment because I had declined to a very deteriorated state by then. So I started on chemo. Right away, right when I left, for September 30th, October, I started on chemo and another medicine. I was on that for, quite a while. I did have an allergic reaction to that at first, but I did improve. So I looked up Poems syndrome. He said, you have something called Poems syndrome. I never heard of it. The only poems I knew as a teacher was the poems we teach our students, and they're in books. So after that, he said it's poem syndrome, and he was so kind and so sweet. He drew a picture. He drew everything out about poems that applies to me. And poem syndrome stands for polyneuropathy, organomegaly, endocrinopathy, monoclonal gamethy, skin changes. And that's the minor version of it. And I practiced that so I would not mess up before I got up here. So, but, and that's just a few of the things. It is an endocrine system. It's a debilitating illness. I was able to walk and do everything before this, but after that, when my hands curled, I lost the ability to walk. I couldn't care for myself. And when I lost the ability to be able to brush my own teeth and do the basic needs, you lose hope. You look to your family, you look into their face to see if they're tired, and they never give up on you. My family requirement was only for me to get better. They took all the pressure of finances, and I ended up having to take out my retirement because I needed the care and I had bills, but that goes through pretty quickly when you have a chronic illness. So they picked up the slack, and to this day, they have still picked up the slack for me. Never made any demands, never once have they made me feel bad. They only want me to get better. But in the meantime, I found a support group. When I was first diagnosed, there wasn't anything I could find about poems. My doctor had given me information about poems. He could give me some. It was basic, but I was trying to look for a support group because I needed to find other people who had this illness. I could not find hardly anyone. It took me over a year to find a group called Smart Patients and then Facebook Poems. And I found out this illness affects 5,000 to 8,000 people in the world only, so it's extremely rare. And I would also like to know, while I'm talking today, I found another poems person who is here supporting me today, Lauren and her daughter, Bridget. It is so wonderful. We talk, but to have them here in the audience supporting me too is such a blessing. I finally met another poems person, the first time I've ever met another one. We've talked on Facebook, but this is the first time I've ever been able to meet another poems person. And also listening to the other people here talk about rare illnesses, a lot of our symptoms and things we go through are similar. So they're familiar, so I could relate. And I'm gonna tell you, another nice thing about being here today, I didn't have to explain to anyone what I'm going through. We already know. We know the hardships, the relationships, some come, some go. But for the most part, I found out when you get better, now that my hands are moving, I'm able to care for myself and walk again, I want to go back to teaching. So I tried to go back, but I realized there's a new normal. You can't go back to the way you were before you were sick. It doesn't happen. So I went back to the classroom, but I relapsed. So I had to go back on another chemo. So I was devastated because I love teaching, but I found out it didn't have the same thing, the same meaning it had to me before I was sick. Everything changed. My mission now was to find out about poems and how can I help others with poems or rare illnesses. So when I found a support group, listened to story after story, all of our stories are similar, symptoms a little different, but for the most part, everyone wanted to know what comes next because I've met people, I've never traveled, but I've met people from Brazil, Paris, Germany, Switzerland, and all of us share the same story. So it doesn't matter the language, we share the same story, and all of them have the same pain. Financially, early diagnosis, that is the most important thing, I think, with any rare illness, is having an early diagnosis. But I found out if the doctors don't know what it is, not because they don't care, they just haven't run across this illness before. Everywhere I went, I didn't even have a primary care physician in the beginning. They saw my charts and they thought it was metastatic cancer. 8 doctors did not take my case. So I was having all these tests and things ran, but I didn't have anybody to report it to. So it was some of them with MRIs, things were just repeated. So I finally got a primary care physician, a wonderful gentleman, but he didn't know anything about poems. He said I was his first poems patient. He was in his 60s. So everywhere, a lot of places that I go, I'm the first. Even just getting a regular trip to the dentist isn't simple. They had to call my doctor at the Cleveland Clinic for me to get treated. So unless I put down some type of cancer, I wasn't able to get treated because there isn't a box for poems. So, and to make things short, when I went back to teaching, the love for teaching, I had the love for the kids and students still, but I found out I could never go back. My normal had changed. My normal is now included poem syndrome. So as I'm going on this journey, I found out you need a lot of people and a lot of support behind you. You need a wonderful team who will stand by you. And I found I have 8 doctors here, and I have a couple of doctors in Toledo. But I found out they all work together. They're wonderful. My oncologist, the lead doctor, but they work together to make sure that I get the best treatment and the best care. And I want to tell you how poems, we're breaking so many barriers and things that said poems people can't do. We have stopped letting poems define us. We have a young lady on there. Her name is Amber and her husband. We have our first poems baby. Her name is Amelia Ann. She has my middle name, Amelia Ann Daughtery. And I want to tell you, it has changed everybody on there. I've seen so many responses from people all over the world. There's so many translations because they said she couldn't. She had the stem cell. The normal treatment for poems is stem cell or chemo and radiation. But she had the stem cell. She found out 5 months later she was pregnant. She couldn't carry the baby to full term. But that little Emily was a source of inspiration for all of us. She saw people commenting that I never seen comment before, and we tracked her status. Little Emily is doing wonderful. She was intubated. She came off the tube. She's breathing on her own, and we just have update and post on her. So she's one of the breakthroughs that we have. There's another gentleman on there. He, after 11 years, he's able to downhill ski again. So there are a lot of breakthroughs that are coming. It takes time, but those are some of the accomplishments that we are making. And again, I want to say, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to say again, thank you, NORD, for inviting us to come and have a voice. We need these type of platforms and for awareness to come out, because the more poems come up and people hear about it, they say, oh, well, I'm familiar with that. Oh, I've heard of that. What is that? You get a chance to explain. So, and thanks again to my family, my wonderful twin sister, who has just been a rock, my daughter, my grandchildren, Giovanni, my son-in-law, Javon, Terrence, my grandson, and my oldest granddaughter, Layla, who has been my Nana side since day one. I truly love you all, and I thank God for you. And thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
It's hard to follow those two. So I'll try to keep it short and sweet for you. My name is Robert Myrick. I am the state ambassador for the state of Kentucky. And I have a rare genetic disease. Short is AHUS, but the long version of it is a typical hemolytic uremic syndrome. Just to go back at the onset of it, I had a small persistent cough, and it maybe lasted for like a week. And my wife, I shouldn't say at the time, my wife right now, she's like, you need to go to the doctor. And been healthy, never been sick, never been stayed overnight at the hospital or anything. So I went to the doctor following week. He chalked it up as, oh, it's just allergies, Kentucky, pollen, it's bad. So it's just allergies. So he gave me an allergy shot. And that persistent cough became more than a persistent cough. I still had the cough, but other things like loss of appetite. I didn't want to eat anything. You know, I lost some weight. So the next week, I went back to my family doctor, and he took my blood pressure and everything. And first time he took it, he's like, I'm gonna take it again. And the second time he took it, it was the same. It was 250 over 190, and yeah. And I didn't know these numbers. My dad used to tell me this stuff all the time, but I was like, is that high? He's like, yeah. Do you want to, I think I'm gonna have to take you to the ER. And he was like, do you want to take the ambulance? And if you get to know me, financials is a big part. And I'm like, well, how much does it cost? And he told me the cost, and I was like, I'll drive. And I can't believe he let me drive to the hospital. It wasn't far. It was like maybe 5 or 10 minutes away. So on my way, I call my mom, call my wife, call all my friends, and let them know. So then when I get to the ER, and the blood pressure actually jumped to 260 over 195. Didn't know what was going on. They did blood tests. My kidneys were failing. They was working less than 10% from what they told me. Heart was failing. Everything was just failing. So I was 30. I'm 32 years old at the time. I was like, well, today's the day. I guess I'm going. Guess I'm going to heaven today. But stayed over. Met my current doctor right now, my kidney and hypertension doctor, throughout the week, and he told me the treatment plan and everything. So he's like, all right. So he got there on Monday. All right, the next Tuesday we're going to do this. We're going to put a catheter in you. And I didn't think anything of it. So I go down and I wake up and I got a dialysis tube in my chest. So I got to do dialysis for how many months or days or whatever. So I got that. Next day he planned something else. We ran all these tests, and this was the whole week in the hospital, and he didn't come to any conclusions. So I finally got a little bit better. My appetite got back. I was still doing dialysis. So from September of 2015 till January 2016, I was doing dialysis. And, my kidneys function started to improve a little bit more. So it improved to the point where I got off dialysis. So I was able to get the tubes out of my chest. But my doctor was still looking for a diagnosis of, okay, something was wrong with you, but we don't know. So we're going to do a genetic test, and we're going to see if we can find anything out of that. So we did a genetic test. Results came back. And I know he had a couple of things that he thought it was. I know he thought it was lupus. He thought it was sickle cell, which runs more in the African-American community. But it came back as it was AHUS. So the day my doctor told me, he told me, all right, Robert, do not Google your diagnosis. If you tell me anything, you tell me not to do anything, more than likely I'm probably going to try and do it. So I told my mom, I told my brothers. Before I even could Google it, they was already Googling it, and they was like, "Oh my God, you're not going to live long," and things like that. So it was more of you look back on it, it's funny, but at the time I was like, oh, I didn't know what to do. So my first reaction, emotionally reaction was, how is this going to change my life? All right, and one of the things I had to do is I have to reach out to somebody who has this disease. So you have to be your own, like Pam and Daphne say, you have to be your own patient advocate. So I looked up, a couple of groups, and I came across the AHUS organization, which was the first organization I was able to be a part of, and met a couple of people who have AHUS, and I probably could give you the definition of it or anything, but it's basically blood clots in the body that attack your small blood vessels, which then go to your main organs. And particularly with mine, it was just my kidneys. So I got with the group, listened to stories, and your whole outlook, like I say, emotionally just changes. So you get to listen to people's stories, learn how they're living, seeing what they're going through, and then, you try to reach more people. I was like, all right, so you got the AHUS group. There's got to be more rare diseases out there. And then you look it up, and there's like 7,000 plus. So now I was able to be a volunteer with the NORD group and then become state ambassador. So I just wanted to be able to be a voice, be a helping hand to people. What can I do to help? In the state of Kentucky, I'm also a basketball coach, so you try to lend your voice out to people and families who may need help or assistance emotionally, just to be able to talk to them. Financially, when they told me the first cost of the medicine, I about had a heart attack, and that's a different story on its own. But there's assistant programs out there to help you, so you don't have to come out of pocket for anything other than your doctor co-pays. I know these medicines are expensive. Trust me, I've been on it for the past 6 years. And, like I said, there's different types of payment assistance programs through different through different groups. So I'm very lucky to be a part of those groups and be able to help out as well. So just to keep it short, like I said, the emotional part of it, um, you know, just like I said, be your own patient advocate, talk to someone. You're not in this. I think the one thing that I've gotten out of everybody, and especially when I go to speak somewhere else, is you're not alone. You're definitely not alone. You're always going to have somebody with you. So whether it's a family member or someone that has the actual disease that you have, you're not alone. So continue to be your own patient advocate. Continue to do your own research. Continue to fight the battle. Don't, if a doctor tells you, hey, this is it, it's really not. My doctor told me that whole week, he's like, oh, you're gonna have to get a kidney transplant. You're gonna have to do this. You're gonna have to do that. Well, I haven't had a kidney transplant. Thank God, not yet. I wasn't on the kidney transplant list. I didn't have to go through any of that. So take one thing from this. Like I said, just continue to live the good life. Continue to, like I said, ask questions. Continue to have someone in your corner and have a great support group. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to kick off with some questions. My family and friends do not understand what I am going through. How have you dealt with this? And if you have dealt with this, how?
For me personally, within the first 6 months of my diagnosis, every year I was diagnosed, my event was in July. And at the end of November, I went in for a scan. I didn't know I had aneurysms. And I had found out that night because a tech had told me that I did. And the next day, the first Saturday of December, my girlfriend we always went Christmas shopping. And I called her and said, I'm not going, I can't go. One, I wasn't working, I had no money, and I just found out I had 2 brain aneurysms on top of dissecting 3 arteries. And she got upset with me. And that was really hard because she was one of my closest friends. And I wrote her a Dear Santa letter just because of the timing of the year about how I felt. And it changed our relationship. We're still friends. And I have some friends who really got it, who jumped in to support me. And others, the dynamics just changed. And I can tell you, by being a part of NORD, I have a whole new set of friends that do get it. I walked in last night, my husband was with me, I saw Debbie, I walked over, hugged her. He goes, how often do you guys talk? I go, I haven't talked to her in a long time, I don't know, but you just make those connections and relationships with people that get it silently. You don't even have to say anything. So I do think that sometimes you've just got to move on. On our website, we do have a letter to family and friends. It's fmdsa.org. It's specific to our patient group, but anybody can use that and edit it, and the people do. It's one of the most downloaded things on our website, besides even our brochure, that they take this letter and send it to family and friends to try to make them understand. So it's, a lot of patients go through this.
Well, and you have to explain to what it is once you understand yourself what it is. My family and friends, my daughter's been there since day one, and she's in the medical field, so she understood more than I did at the time. POEMS is a plasma cell disorder where the plasma cells will continue to grow and they attack your organs, your nerves, if they're not stopped, usually with chemo and radiation or stem cell. So, in getting them to understand, losing the ability to walk, first of all, they're devastated just like you are. When they see somebody that's vibrant, you're going on every day, and then you're declining. So, you're trying to explain when you really don't understand it yourself, and they're trying to understand also. You have to have a balance. I think it takes time to adjust to the news. It takes time to adjust to what you have. Then you have to understand and go from there. How do I move on from this? And it's a slow journey, but when you really read about it, and I have to agree, don't ever Google POEMS. Don't Google, it doesn't help you at all. It scares you actually. But once you start digging and digging, it does take research and being your own advocate. Sometimes you have to really look in the NIH, the NCBI. You have to look in medical places to find out. And there's not a lot of information there. But when you meet up with other people and you start hearing what they're going through, like I have my family come and hear this. I read to them what's going on, and I'm starting to learn. Sometimes you have to start learning about the cells, but you start learning little things on your own, and then you are able to translate to your family. And sometimes they may never know everything about your illness. And I'm just like what Pam said, I had some friends. I lost some good friends that I never thought I would. But sometimes I don't think they're bad people. They just don't understand what you're going through. They don't know how to address you. They don't know how to respond to you. So they think it's easier to back away when you need them to pull closer. But I've been able to draw closer to people who needed to be there next to me. I've met so many wonderful people now. So I think the right people come in when they need to. And so I would say just keep talking to your family every day. Let them know what you go through. And the more you talk to them, the more they will understand, and your friends.
The next question is from someone who struggles with knowing how and what their adult children need or want from them. As an adult with a rare disease, what do you want and need from your parents now, even though you are an adult?
For me personally, to go back to the previous question, if I asked my mom anything, she would just tell me, just suck it up and don't worry about it. But so I can't really ask her for a lot of things. So I wish I could answer that question better. Because like I said, my mom would, like I said, she's just one of those types where she'll just say, "Oh, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you," even though she knows it is. So I wish I could answer that better, but I cannot. Hopefully, Pam and Daphne can.
My parents are both deceased, but when I was diagnosed years ago, they were very supportive. And I think the best thing they could have did was, as a nurse, one of the things that was hard for me is when my hospital room would be full of people, it overwhelmed me. That really made me feel like I was going to die. Why are you here? And so my mom was my number one advocate, and she would just be in the room and step back, but she was there when I needed her, and she let me guide that need. And so that was the most helpful thing to me with my parents. They were always there, but they let me dictate how things were going to go.
My father passed away by that time about 11 years ago, but my mother was alive when I was diagnosed. She didn't understand how come somebody's on chemo and it's not considered your typical cancer. So she didn't understand. She was always scared. She ended up passing away before I recovered. I wish she could have seen where I am today. I wasn't here when she passed, but she knew. She said she saw in a vision that I was going to get better. So I wasn't walking anything like I am today, but you're helping them understand. Sometimes they may never understand. You just have to take a chance and explain the best that you can. But just being by your side and comforting, be able to talk to you every day, I think that helps.
Thank you. Someone wrote, I have had trouble connecting with others in any area. How have you connected with others who have your diagnosis?
So for me, when I was diagnosed, there was no organization, and there was no Facebook. Today, I think that you can, if there is no organization, I would reach out to NORD because they probably are aware of other patients, or you can find maybe a similar disease. So like Daphne's disease, you may not be specific to that, but there might be other cancer groups where patients go through the same things and might understand that. So I would look on Facebook, even if there's no page, you can just Google whatever the disease is, and if people are posting on it, it comes up. The other thing I would do, somebody brought up how to find specialists earlier, and one of the things that I did was I looked for articles, and then I looked at those physicians and researchers who were editors in those, and then they always have to include contact information, and so I would reach out to them as well, and that's how I started.
Yeah, for me, Facebook groups, I hardly use it, but Facebook groups are the way to look up for your patient organization. So I would definitely look for Facebook groups as well.
Facebook groups for me also. There is an organization for what I have. All of mine is attached to the cancer organizations that I've joined some of those, but it is Facebook group and a Smart Patients group. and we get to meet. And once you get on there, sometimes they have other organizations, but everyone knew about NORD. My doctor actually told me about NORD, and the Facebook group came up when I was on Smart Patient. Somebody mentioned that to me. So Facebook is an excellent place to find. There's some very nice groups on there for your illness.
Okay, one final question. A rare disease is a roller coaster ride. Has your outlook on life changed, and how?
Yes, it has. The rare disease that I have, the main outlook that's changed is, especially with kids having children, is as genetic, so it can pass down onto them as well. So I can search for these signs within them. If they're real sick or anything, I immediately take them to the doctor. They already know, exactly what I have. So my outlook has changed in that regard, but also just I was always more positive and upbeat, but now, any negativity that tries to, come within my life or within family or anything, I'll just eliminate. So I always just try to stay positive, upbeat, and we have to look at it like we probably shouldn't be here right now. That's how I look at it. Like I shouldn't be here, Daphne shouldn't be here, Pam shouldn't be here. So through the grace of God, we're still here, able to tell our stories and be able to reach out to others and help people out. So definitely outlook has changed, and just continue to be positive with it.
For me, it was really hard at first. So if whoever wrote that question, if you're newly diagnosed, again, try to find your resources and your people. I'm in a much better place 22 years later. I can't do the things that I used to be able to do, but even now I have trouble just walking. And so that's just more of an age-related, more on my knees and hips things. But as Robert just said, I look back and think that I have gotten 22 years of my life that I might not have had in my situation. And there's so much hope through this organization, through the people that are involved in it, get involved in legislation and really make a difference. There's a lot of changes, and medicine is so far advanced right now that I really do think that we all have hope for our futures.
Yes, that is true. Every day I wake up, I thank God I'm alive. I don't take any days for granted. And I look now to support other people, because when I look on Facebook and there's somebody just joining, I'm so glad I found a group, and you see 30, 40 people jumping in to encourage them, because you are scared. That first diagnosis is scary. You don't know where you're going. You don't know if you're going to live or die. And we do also, I want to reiterate again, don't ever Google that information. Find it somewhere else. But we also encourage each other that you will live, because I have to have this stem cell. It is a process you go through, but you encourage each other and you get through it. Every step of the way, you can see people on the Facebook poems. Well, I had my stem cell today, or they're taking my cells today. I have an apheresis today. Every step of the way, we're encouraging them, and they're reaching out to us, and their families are reaching out to us. So we don't just include the patient, we include the family, because it's our caregivers that get us through too. So every day you're living with a rare disease. You're not just living with it, but it's your family living with it through with you.
I lied to you. We have one more quick question. And this is a little personal, but if you could just speak generally, how do you care for yourself financially while living with such a complicated diagnosis?
I'm not able to care for myself financially anymore, because I'm not able to go back to work. But these wonderful people you see right here sitting on this row in front of you have cared for me every step of the way. And I won't talk too much because I get emotional. They have never made a demand on me. Every need that I get, even from when I couldn't even brush my teeth, cut my food, they were there, still going out to work, caring for me. Even my granddaughter, who just turned 18, she even got a job to help me with insurance, because it was really, really expensive. I went from Cobra to the school. I was paying $783 a month for Cobra, just because the only place I could be treated was at Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic. So she got a job, my daughter, every day since 2019. Since my sister stopped, my sister brought me down every day up until then. My daughter picked up from 2019, and they have driven me to every appointment, city here, it didn't matter. And they paid the insurance, never complained. So it is hard financially. And you may never be able to go back to work, but you have to find something else that you are able to do. So I found out there's a lot of advocate things, but you have to know yourself and your body. What are you capable of doing? I found out now that mostly a sit-down job or a desk job is all I can do. Going back to the classroom, I relapsed twice. So physically, I'm not able to because it is an endocrine and it affects the hormones. You're exhausted. So you have to find out what your norm is with your illness. So financially, it is hard, but if you get a good support group, I'm finding a lot of information today. I found out about different organizations that I'm thankful for being here today. So you just have to investigate a little bit.
I'm still able to work full time, luckily, especially with COVID hit. I was able to work from home a lot, so now my current employer allows me to, work remote a couple days throughout the week. So luckily, I'm still able to, do a full-time job, still able to help kids out in the community and coach basketball and do things of that nature. So um, with my particular rare disease, I get infusions once every 8 weeks. So I'm still able to pretty normally live a normal life, or try to at least.
I'm fortunate enough that I do still work. I switched careers, but financially, right now, I don't have that issue. What I would say to you is, especially during the pandemic, there are so many opportunities that I think that people can do remotely from home. Personally, within my organization, there's things that I am not good at, like Excel and so we're always looking for people who have that expertise and experience that can actually work remotely for us. So I would go to NORD, I would look at what they offer financially, and I would also look at opportunities for these online work from home, even if it's just not a full-time job, but you're just working for different people and offering your services.
Thank you all so much for your time and expertise and sharing your stories. Let's give them a round of applause.